Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is World Now. I am Precious Amayo. Now, we'll start off with the U.S. war on Iran, as U.S. President Donald Trump says no talks are currently taking place with Iran, contradicting earlier claims from his own administration that diplomacy was still active. Trump also insisted the Strait of Hormuz remains open, and that's despite Iran saying the key shipping route is closed. He said a U.S. naval blockade remains in force and that mines in the waterway had been removed or detonated. The uncertainty comes after a temporary ceasefire expired on Monday, with an Iranian official warning that Tehran was shifting to a fully offensive military posture. There were no reports of fresh strikes on Tuesday, but hopes of a deal to end the nearly 6-month conflict are fading. Oil prices rose again while global stocks fell as investors worry about prolonged disruption to energy supplies, inflation, and government borrowing costs. The U.S. says one of its main objectives is to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon, but experts warn that achieving a lasting settlement could prove difficult. We're joined now by partner Gainful Solutions and Global Affairs analyst Stephen Hayes. Good to have you join us, Mr. Hayes.
Good to see you again as well.
So let's start with the latest comment coming from President Trump. He has asserted that the United States is not engaged in any talks with Iran and has not scheduled any. Does this appear to reflect the president's frustration with Iran's unwillingness to bend?
Well, I think it's certainly a reflection of President Trump's frustrations, which are apparently many. Sometimes you get the feelings you're aboard the HMS Bounty right now in terms of what's real and what's not real, the conflicting statements and so forth. But clearly the president is frustrated. That's likely not going to change under many circumstances.
Now, instead of claiming talks were proceeding well as they would usually do and that a new deal was just around the corner, President Trump for the first time is saying, look, there is no talk. There is no negotiation. There is no the Strait of Hormuz. He keeps saying the Strait of Hormuz is closed. We're not good. The U.S. is not going to have further negotiation. I mean, we also see a shift in his the kind of statement he's making now instead of the conflicting statements. Do you also sense that there is also a shift in strategy?
I think there is a shift in strategy, but to be honest, there's a shift in strategy almost every week, it seems. So there's no consistency apparent. Clearly, there are negotiations going on behind the scenes. It may be very informal. They're not any formal negotiations, but certainly there's discussions. There's always discussions in times like this behind the scenes. So that's one point that I think is wrong. The fact that the strait is closed is also not accurate. There's by any number of admissions, including our own Secretary of Energy, oil is getting through, and that's not necessarily a negative. So the strait's not closed. There's at least 4 million barrels a day going through on the Oman, particularly on the Oman side. So it's nothing is really. You cannot rely on anything at this moment because there's so much conflicting information. But the strait is open to some extent. Oil is getting through to some extent. There are informal, unofficial, I should say, unofficial, probably informal as well, discussions behind the scenes. So and as we all know, statements change almost daily.
I was listening to Republican Senator Rick Scott, where he said that President Trump will have to resume a full war with Iran. Will squeezing Iran harder and win concessions that were never part of this agreement?
I think that's the strategy right now. This week's strategy is we're going to work on a stranglehold. We're not going to bomb any or as much. So I think now the strategy is more long-term. It's probably more realistic in terms of strangling the economy of Iran. That's still going to be difficult, but there are signs that it's working in that regard. The Iran oil exports are down significantly, almost at between 10 and 20% of what it was a few months ago. So there is some data and evidence that that strategy might work to some extent.
You think that the president he's waiting this out until Iran's leaders signal fresh willingness to strike a deal before he re-engages? You think that's going to work? Because Iran seems to also say, look, they're now taking a military posture as well.
Well, Iran's, particularly the Revolutionary Guards, that there are no talks. There is no agreement. There's no agreement until the U.S. withdraws. That's unrealistic as well. So I think it's what's really going on is going to be very, very difficult. But I think there is an interest certainly in resolving this. There's an interest in Iran in resolving it. It's their interest to find some resolution. But again, you're talking about national dignity on both sides. You're talking about the ability to find common ground. And when you're calling each other names, you're not going to find much common ground in that regard.
I'll get back to that question of common ground in just a moment, but I wanted to speak to the intensifying questions about the toll this unpopular war has taken on the U.S. military.
Well, I think there is, I'm not on those ships, but clearly there is a toll being taken. There is, families are reporting, I think quite accurately from their sons and daughters on warships, that there is a stress and strain on the time that's required at sea. There's also the more direct toll of how much supplies and how much support can the military give given its global commitments. We are withdrawing some commitments, some ships out of the China Sea, the China area, into Taiwan. So that's creating a vulnerability. Our supplies are getting lower, our supply line. And that's also, again, the president says it's not, but others in the Defense Department say that it is. So, in this day and age, who do you believe? I think that there probably is a great deal of strain on our ability to continue to supply our military over the long term. It's also affecting what we can and cannot do with the Ukraine.
And with this information, and I'm sure that the Iranians also have this information as well in terms of the pressure that President Trump is facing back home. On the flip side, the kind of pressure that the Iranians are facing is to not make a deal that will give up the country's nuclear weapon. So that also seems more like support if you look at it the other way. So who is more likely to bend with the kind of pressure both sides are facing?
I think that it's possible that Iran would say we're not going to do that. We're not going to create a nuclear weapon. Whether that can be believed or not, but the fact is they really don't need a nuclear weapon when they have an oil supply and they have the Strait of Hormuz there as a leverage. So I think it's possible that Iran would say we're not going to do create a nuclear weapon. And of course, you have to have the verification. The verification was always difficult, even under the IAEA. And so I think that's one area where Iran would I think, likely give, assuming that there's verification involved. If that becomes the only sticking point, then I think it's probably resolvable. Resolvable meaning that everybody saves face to some extent, including President Trump, and that we say, okay, we got our nuclear deal, and and we can get out. But again, we've created greater vulnerabilities on the global oil supply. We've not necessarily helped the people of Iran under a very brutal regime. But again, I think the most likely, to answer your question, the most likely area of common ground is some eventual agreement on the nuclear weapons not being built.
And when you look at President Trump's approval rating, it is now at an abysmal level. That's dropped to 33%. To what extent has his handling of this war influenced how Americans view his leadership?
Well, I think the polls are accurate. There's increasingly little confidence, or shrinking confidence, to put it more positively. There's shrinking confidence in the president's leadership. He's erratic. He threatens allies. For instance, the threatening to bomb Oman. That's ridiculous. I'd have other words for it too, but there is the appearance of instability in the White House. And I say that with the USA Today also questioning that in its editorial columns, op-ed pieces. So I think that there's growing concern on a number of fronts right now. The elections, the primary elections last night also showed a weakening of his base, the people that he endorsed. Some got in, but several did not. So I think there's a very growing concern about leadership in this country right now.
And President Trump probably got into this war. Not probably, he got into this war and said in 4 to 6 weeks thereabout, the war will be over. It's now almost 6 months. The war is still on. Is he now at a dead end in terms of his the solutions to get out of this war?
Well, I don't think he's at a dead end. There's always ways to get out of it, but the question is the question of face. Is he?
Sorry, maybe I should rephrase, Mr. Hayes. Maybe dead end in terms of pulling out of this war without significant victory.
I'd say the same thing. It's not necessarily at a dead end in that area. There's if he makes the nuclear issue the significant victory, then he can claim victory. The fact is that whatever happens, he's going to claim victory, whether it's a loss or not. That's the nature of this president. That's frankly the nature of politics often as well. But yes, he's in a very, very difficult spot to answer your question.
And to what extent, just in general now, when we look at some of the decisions the president has made recently, whether it's Oman, South Korea, Ukraine, to what extent has America's foreign policy shifted under this president?
Well, the American foreign policy is not so much shifted, it's just in chaos right now. I don't think it indicates necessarily a shift, but the will of one person to make fairly impetuous decisions, and I think that's really a concern. And the fact is that he's got a political party, the Republican Party, that has followed the line, but now are starting to openly express concern as well as a sign that it's cracking. But there is no consistent U.S. foreign policy right now, and I think that's a major concern. We have been damaged considerably internationally.
Well, we're following developments as always in the U.S. A few months to the midterm elections, Iran negotiations almost at a dead end, not a dead end, maybe almost at a halt, but we'll see how things play out. Thank you so much for your time, as always. Our partner, Gainful Solutions, Stephen Hayes.
Thank you, Precious. Always an honor. Thank you.
All right, let's take a break now. When we return, we'll turn our attention to humanitarian workers who perhaps one of the most important people in the world being targeted as well during times of crisis. The numbers are alarming. That's what the United Nations says. But that's after the break. Stay with us.